Welcome to Module 2. In this session, we're going to focus in on authenticity. Now, you may think it's a little bit strange that we dedicate a whole session to the idea of showing up as yourself. However, I have seen so many occasions where aspiring authors, just like you, have started to doubt themselves, especially in this early foundational stage. So what I would love to see for you is that you can overcome any of that inner chat that tells you you're not good enough, your story is not good enough, and the way that you write is not good enough. That's the trifecta that can trip over so many aspiring authors. The tragedy of that is that the stories that had burned so brightly on their hearts and in their minds never get to see the light of day because that self-doubt ends up winning. So by the end of this module, you will understand exactly why your story and the way that you tell it is absolutely perfect just the way it is. So what do we mean by authenticity? In a nutshell, it really is just showing up as the way that you are, without a need to wear a mask, without a need to look, act, or sound like anyone other than yourself. So if you were at home in your pajamas, you would be the same person that you are when you're on stage at your book launch with a room full of people who are there to support you. The same person. Now, what happens with some aspiring authors is when that little voice pipes up and says, you're not good enough, the way that you tell your story is not good enough, what are you even doing? We can fall into what's known as accidental inauthenticity. Now, that is not driven by a desire to deceive. It doesn't come from a place of that malintent. But what it means is that we try to put on a mask. We try to show up as something other than ourselves because we think there's a better way of being. So it is accidental in that you might not even realize that it's happening. But I'm going to show you in this module 3 core ways that I do see this evolve and happen with aspiring authors, and show you how you can make sure that that doesn't happen on your journey. So the first element comes down to messing with timelines. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean that you feel like the way in which your life story or the way in which you collected the knowledge that you want to share didn't happen in a dramatic way or dramatic enough way, and you feel like you have to move things around. Now I'm going to show you a real-life example of just how easily this can creep into your writing process without you even realizing. So this story belongs to an author that I've worked with by the name of Monica. Now she's Monica with inverted commas because I can't share her real name. So Monica was a ghostwriting client, and with the beautiful clients I have the privilege of ghostwriting for, I sign non-disclosure agreements, which means that I cannot share their names or too much of the detail about their books to protect them from that. So Monica was beautiful. She had an amazing energy around her story and had huge visions of it becoming a Hollywood blockbuster, of being on Oprah's book club, all of the amazing major milestones that a lot of aspiring authors have. And her energy around it was beautiful. So her story had all of the amazing elements that would naturally make up a Hollywood blockbuster. Now, the problem that we had to work through was that the timeline over which these events happened was spread out over a number of years. And in her quest to make it exciting and engaging and worthy of the big screen, Monica wanted to condense those timelines down. So by that, I mean moving events, and these events were actually Googleable. You could look them up online. Moving events closer together to make it more impactful and more juicy. Now, in and of itself, that's not a bad thing if you're writing a fiction book or something that's a combination of nonfiction and fiction. However, Monica was going to use this book as a pillar for her business, in which case authenticity and presenting things exactly as they are is paramount to that. The reason for that is that if anyone were to Google any of the events that had happened and see that there was a discrepancy between when they were presented in the book and when they occurred in real life, the whole fabric of that book would be undone because everything would come into question. And when you have a story or a lived experience that is stranger than fiction, that's the last thing that you want people to be questioning. So we were able to overcome this barrier with Monica by boiling it down to what the core purpose of her book is. Once she realized that it was to present her authentic story in a way that would help connect with readers and show them the way to lead a better life, the idea of zhuzhing things up and making it Hollywoodized didn't seem so appealing anymore. So she was able to present her story in her most authentic way with the authentic timeline, knowing that if and when a Hollywood agent comes knocking on her door, they can sprinkle their magic on it to bring it to the big screen. The most important thing was having that core resource, that key element of the book, as authentic as possible. So the second element is all around changing your voice. So it's coming back to that feeling of the way that I write or the way that I share my story isn't fancy enough or isn't academic enough or isn't funny enough. And what happens then is that we tend to try and emulate authors and writers that we love. It's a natural progression. So the danger with doing this is that you lose your authentic voice and you create a disconnect between the person you are and how you communicate with your friends and family and the person who appears in the pages of your book. As a ghostwriter, I know how vital it is for someone to pick up a book and feel like that person is sitting across from them, sharing a beautiful coffee and telling them their life story or sharing their knowledge. And if you try to emulate someone else's style, that disconnect is going to be there immediately. It really is simple to understand when you break it right down. So I have 2 books here with me. First is Eat, Pray, Love by Elizabeth Gilbert, a very, very well-known international best-selling book. The second is Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, also an international best-selling book. These 2 authors have shown up in their authentic ways in their books. So with Elizabeth Gilbert, any fans of hers will know she's very descriptive, very emotive, very poetic in the way that she writes. Now, David Goggins, on the other hand, very straight to the point, very black and white. A lot of F-bombs in this bad boy. And that's his authentic style. So when you think about how these 2 authors have shown up, it perfectly aligns with the people you would meet in real life. Now imagine if we were to swap this. If we were to put David Goggins style language and storytelling inside the cover of an Elizabeth Gilbert style book. It would be so discombobulating, you would absolutely lose your mind because it doesn't line up. So you can see how easily it is that you create a disconnect with your reader just by simply trying to be someone else. So now that you know that, you're aware of that, you can make sure that whenever you sit down to write, you are sharing it in your very own authentic voice that no one else can emulate because it belongs to you. So I'd love you to understand that you can absolutely show up 100% as yourself in your book. And there are a whole realm of people out there just waiting to hear your story in your own words. Now, the third element that I want to share with you is that feeling that your writing is not good enough. And again, I have a beautiful story that I can share from a real-life aspiring author who was once exactly where you are now. And that is Bill Peterson, who wrote From Snowmen to Kangaroos, An Unexpected Journey. Now, Bill is actually a man of the land, so a farmer and an inventor. So when he decided to write his book, I was really intrigued to connect with him and to understand more about what he wanted to create. So this is his autobiography of growing up in post-World War II Sweden and emigrating to Australia with no English and no connections and basically building a life from the ground up. Now, I had the opportunity to meet with Bill at a coffee shop before I got a hold of his first draft of his manuscript, and he shared such a beautiful tale. I really couldn't wait to get home, chuck the USB in, and get stuck into what it was that he had created. Now, as I mentioned, Bill is a man of the land, also a man of few words and very direct. But what I didn't know about Bill as a writer was that he also didn't really like using punctuation or capital letters or, any kind of grammar. And it did actually take me a hot minute to kind of calm down when I saw the state of his manuscript. Now, the reason I share this with you is not to shame Bill, Because by the time I took a deep breath and I sat down and I started to read the content without any attention to the grammar and all of that fiddly stuff that editors take care of, Bill was an amazing storyteller. So it literally was as if I was back in the coffee shop and he was telling me in greater detail what he had shared with me earlier. So while Bill was not an amazing writer, he was a perfect storyteller, because all he did was focus on how to tell his story and just share it in his most authentic voice. So in that way, Bill nailed it. And we were able to fix up all that other stuff later in editing anyway. So all that's required here is a simple mindset flip. Because when we talk about becoming an author or writing a book, those words can sometimes feel heavy and carry with them expectations that we place on ourselves, to write the perfect sentence and to craft the most powerful book in the first instance. And that can actually be a huge handbrake at times. So this tiny little mindset flip is a tip I'd love to give you now that you can take with you for your whole journey far beyond this workshop. And that is to just tweak your language a little bit. So instead of saying I'm an author or I'm a writer, if that feels heavy, if that places expectations on you, just think instead, I'm an awesome storyteller. Because you tell stories every single day. When you meet friends for a coffee, when you come home from work and you share your day with your family or your spouse or your significant other, you're always telling stories. So just sinking back into that, and because you're the one who've lived it and learnt it, you are the best person to tell that story. So now that you understand those 3 elements that can often trip up aspiring authors just like yourself, I'm going to share with you a technique that is going to help you lock in that why, that drive, that purpose that is going to help propel you through all of those mindset barriers and keep you focused when it comes time to structure your book. Now, it's called the 5 why technique, and you may have come across it if you've ever done any personal development, but the foundations of it were created for the Toyota car company, of all things. Now, Sakichi Toyota, who founded the company in the 1930s, realized that car engines are complex machines. And quite often, people would be bringing their cars in for a rattling sound or some kind of squeaking that was going on. And the technicians were trying their best to fix it and send them on their way. So what was happening is that these technicians were fixing the surface level problem. And cars were coming back and coming back and coming back. And as a business owner, the last thing that you want to do is have the same problems presenting time and time again. It costs time and it costs money. So Sakichi, in his brilliance, realized that these technicians needed to go below the surface. They needed to go dig deeper to find out why these things were happening. So he created the 5 why technique. And it really is exactly what the name states. It's asking the same question 5 times. So for mechanics, they were able to ask that question, get down a level, get down further each time. And usually by the time they reached the 5th why, they had the core cause of what was making that rattling sound or that squeak, and they could fix it and the car wouldn't come back. So it solves the problem. Now, when we apply this to a book writing perspective, there's so many people out there who dream of becoming an author and writing their book one day. But the thing that separates out those who dream of it and those who actually achieve it is that they understand why they are doing it. So at a surface level, if I was to ask you why you wanted to write your book, the most common responses that I get are, well, my friend Patty told me that I have an amazing story and I should write a book. Another common thing that you might say is, well, my psychic told me to, or I've always felt like I would become an author. So these are all very surface level reasons why, and they're not enough to drive you through the process of creating these solid foundations and then, of course, writing your first draft. So it's really important that you take the time and do this 5 why technique so that you can dig deep and understand the core driver for you. Now, a beautiful thing that I see time and time again with this process is that it is quite surface level for the first 2 or 3 whys, But by the time you hit that fourth and your fifth, you really feel it in your gut that you are getting closer and closer to uncovering what the true why is for you. Once you have locked that in, it becomes a core driver for you going forward. And whenever you're feeling down, whenever you're doubting yourself, whenever you question any part of this journey and why you're doing it, revisiting that why is going to give you all the fuel that you need to reignite your passion and keep moving forward. So as you know, I'm an author myself, and I had to go through the process of really anchoring in why it is that I decided to write not one book, but 3. So I have a trilogy: the mindful author, the structured author, and the published author. So that is a big undertaking, and I had to really dig deep to understand what my motivation was to embark on such a big journey. So I'd like to take you through my 5 why, just as an example, so that you can see how the process unfolds. So my first why do I want to write a book? Not only a book, but to commit to a trilogy as well. The first why is because I'm only one person and I can only reach so many people with these workshops and in-person events. So a book actually makes a lot of sense from a business perspective because it allows me to have a global reach. My second why is it important to have a global reach? Because there's people all around the world walking around every single day that have the most amazing stories, knowledge, lived experience cooped up inside of them that may never see the light of day. My third why is it so important for these stories to be released into the world? Because we see so much collective wisdom being held inside and not being shared. There are so many stories and historical events that could have different perspectives that can help to shape the way that we view the world. And when people don't share that knowledge and that wisdom or those experiences, we don't have the benefit of learning from them and being inspired by them. So the fourth why is then looking at why people hold their stories within themselves. And that really comes down to society at large. You know, we can get conditioned to think and feel and believe certain things. And quite often that can lead us to repressing our voice, to feeling like what we have to say isn't worth sharing. So there's many reasons for this. When we look at how we live our lives, the way that society conditions us to think, feel, and believe certain things. And when we don't align with that, it can feel like we need to keep that to ourselves. There's also the way that we talk to ourselves as well. You know, we talk ourselves out of sharing our opinions and sharing what we think and know and love for fear of judgment. Fear of judgment is a huge one as well. There's so many different things working against potential storytellers. So my fifth why, and the reason that I'm driven to show up here and to do everything that I do with people in the storytelling realm, is because everyone deserves a voice. Everyone has a voice, and to be able to give them the pathway forward through my books, through this workshop, however form it takes, is definitely my driving why, and why these books have come out into the world. So you can see how easily it shifts from it's good for business all the way down to, my goodness, everyone has a voice and they need to be empowered to share that voice. It's the difference is chalk and cheese. Now, I've been able to share my 5 why with you off the bat, but trust me, this is not something that happens instantaneously. So you want to make sure you carve out some beautiful space for yourself to sit down, reflect, and really think through these questions for yourself. Just remember that there is no right or wrong answer. Every single person's journey is unique, and every single person's motivation and why is going to be specific to you. So no matter what the answers are that come out, just trust them and flow with them. And you might even feel compelled to do a 6th or a 7th why if you feel like you haven't quite got that feeling or the goosebumps or that, that gut reaction that comes when you hit that point. And don't feel pressure to get it all done in one sitting as well. If you're sitting down, you're giving yourself the space and you're not feeling connected to the activity, then step up, re-energize, maybe go do some washing or get a cup of coffee and just reset before you try again. The last thing that we want this to do is be a source of frustration for you, because once you uncover that why, it's going to be the foundation for everything going forward. So you want to give it the space and the time that it needs. I'm so excited to see what unfolds for you through this activity, and knowing that this core piece is going to be such a foundation that you can build off going forward. So congratulations. Once you knock this out of the park, it's all up from here, and I look forward to seeing you in the next module.